So I know there's a little bit of a delay, but welcome everybody who's on the stream to our first interview of the new season here on Q&A Corner, presented by HighTechU. We're going to get right into things because we got a lot of great questions and there's been some great things submitted, and there's I'm sure going to be some more questions that are coming. But before we get started, just so you know what the heck is going on, today's Q&A Corner features the one and only Noah Warder. Noah is currently the head of people at Guusto, which is a company based out of Vancouver, Noah?
Correct.
Yes. Formerly of Battlesnake fame, which is another tech company here in Victoria. Of course, if this is your first time tuning in to Q&A Corner, this is interactive industry interviews presented by HighTechU, based out of the University of Victoria. This is your opportunity to connect with folks that are working in the tech industry here in British Columbia and beyond, to ask them questions, to learn a little bit about their journey, and also an opportunity for me to connect with some of the amazing people that I've met in my journey working alongside tech here in Victoria in YYJ Tech. So without further ado, I think we're going to get started with some questions that came through previously. And then if you do have any questions, you can feel free to throw them in the stream chat. I'm going to be watching the stream chat the entire time. If anything comes up as we go, feel free to knock it in there, and I'll make sure that Noah knows what's going on. So, I did a little bit of an intro for you, Noah, but maybe you want to do a little bit more of an intro, just a little bit about you and how you have gotten connected with what HighTechU is up to.
For sure, yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about my background and then how you and I met, because I think it's kind of a good story. But so I come from a pretty non-traditional people HR background. I actually have a degree in education. I was supposed to be a teacher. With a lot of experience in hospitality management, and then wanted to get back into doing a master's in business, but fell into tech instead, and sort of just started growing from there, and scaled another company called Dispatch here in Victoria when they still had operations down in the United States. Scaled their organization to about 60, 70 people based in Victoria, BC, San Francisco, and then we had a couple of remote people kind of peppered across Canada and the US. And then, like you said, moved from there to co-found Battlesnake with a couple other people, and then from there joined Guusto as the head of people. And actually how you and I met was when you were just starting HighTechU and you were looking for partners to sort of come on board. And I think we were at Dispatch, we were one of the first companies to hire one of the HighTechU interns, and they were amazing. Like hands down one of the smartest, youngest people we've ever worked with. And I know we were super excited and super thankful for being able to be part of that sort of MVP test run for HighTechU, and it's awesome to see that it's continuing happening. And I'm super excited that more young people are able to take advantage of this program.
Yeah, Dispatch was actually the first, the OG funder that got the program off the ground when it started. It was Dispatch, or some of us at the time, and then there was a connection with Stembolt, which was another company that doesn't exist anymore in Victoria, and then you guys really pushed us over the edge. And it's funny because things have changed, but I'm really excited. We've just gotten another round of funding so that we're hiring some students to work on some internal projects. So this is the first really time since the first year where Dispatch hired somebody to work full-time, that we're going to have some students working on some open source projects. And I'm already seeing some applications come in from across the province. And a student just built out an app that he pushed to Heroku, that he built in an Ionic framework, which is a pretty up and coming framework for front end stuff. And it's just one of these situations where I'm like, wow, these high school students are doing some things that fourth year university students are struggling to try and figure out how to put a favicon on their app, right?
I know, it's pretty crazy to see what this next generation of tech software developers is going to be able to do, because like you said, there's these high school students who are they've been doing software development for years already, and they're not even in university.
Totally. Well, and I'm curious. So, I mean, you guys hired Bridget, who was the first sort of HighTechU person to go through the internship program. And I'm curious, like, that was obviously would have been a risk as like a company hiring somebody that was like 18, fresh out of high school. Why take the risk, and then B, as like somebody in people operations and that hires a lot of people, like what was it about her or employees like her that really said like, yes, this is a good fit?
So I'll answer the first part of the question, like why take that risk? And I think a big part of it was like sort of the culture and our mission at Dispatch at the time was like we really wanted to ensure that the community that we were a part of was also growing and had the expertise and the employees to continue to grow tech in Victoria. And so one of those things we saw in HighTechU was like this is the perfect opportunity to ensure that this next generation of software developers is staying in Victoria. They're working with Victoria companies. They're getting their foundation here, and if we can be a part of that, why wouldn't we want to be a part of that? And so it was really a win-win for us of like, we're donating some money to HighTechU. We're hiring this high school student and giving them an opportunity to learn and grow as a professional even before they're going into school, and we get exposed to this awesome developer that we hope would eventually come back to us either as a co-op student or maybe full-time when they're done university, or maybe 6-7 years down the line they're looking for an intermediate or senior software development role, and we can connect with them then and say, hey, like why don't we helped you start, why don't you come help us continue to grow? And then with Bridget and people like her is that I'd say with someone who doesn't have a lot of like quote unquote industry experience, it was really her passion and her professionalism that really kind of came through that convinced us to hire her over some of the other HighTechU grads who all of them, the ones that we interviewed, were amazing, but Bridget kind of like set the bar for exceptionalism of like professionalism, passion. She had a solid understanding of a lot of like frameworks and technologies, like you said, like her understanding of software development was farther along than a lot of second or third year co-op students that we interview. And so it was like, if we can get this person in before they're in university, imagine what they could do for us later on. And hopefully we can help them realize their career as well.
Totally. Yeah, and I mean, she went on like the next year to go and work for a larger startup in town, and then she went off to Vancouver to work for a bigger startup, and like I don't even know where she's ended up, but I think it speaks to like the fact that she had that experience so young. She's been able to really jump into those things, which is super cool.
Yeah, and we were able to give her like projects, and she really owned them with a lot of mentorship, but she was the one making those technical decisions. She was the one able to like bring ideas to the table, and our whole job was like we wanted to empower her to make those decisions and own those projects that we were giving over to her.
Totally. So okay, so then maybe that that kind of drives into kind of the next piece. So your role, you've lived in like that people ops world for a really long time, and like that whole operation side of tech businesses. So there's a question that just came in, but I'm curious, what is like the day-to-day requirements, or what are you really focused on in the roles that you're doing in people ops? Is it more sort of dispersing tasks out to people, or is it more sort of helping them succeed and find ways to be successful in that work environment?
Yeah, it's sort of, it's twofold. So a big part of what I do is like those day-to-day tasks, especially at like a younger startup, like you're not sitting back and telling people how to do the job and kind of just defining strategy and all that kind of stuff. You're in there, you're getting your hands dirty, you're doing it day to day, and if you want to be successful at that, you have to do the jobs that sometimes people don't want to do. Like I remember running into the store to get snacks for the office, and like run into the office store to get paper for the printer that we had to get like once every 2 years because we didn't print anything, but we had to print some things, and like it was usually actually just employees printing off like bank forms and stuff like that. That's what our printer was mainly utilized for. But like those things that like, I was a director of operations at that time, but sometimes it was like I'm not going to go ask a developer to stop doing software development to go do that, I'm going to go and do it, or I'm going to go pick up lunch for everyone because that's part of the job. And then the other part of it is like that strategy and setting those goals and building out the processes and the frameworks so that the team can be as successful as possible. So they don't have to worry about all those little things. And my philosophy around people operations and HR and however you want to put a label on it is our role is to serve the team. Like, we're there to serve the team. We're there to make sure that they are successful. They have the skills and the process and the frameworks to grow in their careers, to grow as individuals. And they don't have to worry about if payroll is going to come in that month, if, how hard is it to take vacation? Are their benefits adequate enough? All that kind of stuff. Like, that stuff should not be in their mind. They should be able to focus on their job and connect with their coworkers. And so, and really just grow as individuals. And so that's really what I think people operations is all about, and is turning into more of, as that traditional model of HR kind of slowly gets scrapped from everyone's psyche, because it should be, and it should have gotten scrapped a long time ago.
So is that kind of what it has been in the tech sector, that it's being called people ops because HR has such like a bad taste for people?
I think that's why it started. I think like a couple reasons why they sort of like rebranded HR was like, no one likes the term HR. Humans aren't resources. They're a team. They're not a resource for you to utilize and use and then discard. They are the backbone of your company. And if you don't treat them as your most valuable asset, they're going to leave and your company's going to fail. And so I think moving away from that, like people operations, we're there to serve people. We're there to operate the organization, and we're there to ensure success. The other is like the name change was, let's get away from this HR model that doesn't work anymore, and let's choose something that mirrors what we do more so day to day. And so it's operations for the people of the organization. We're making sure that they have everything they need to operate in their full capacity.
Totally. Okay, so there's a question that's come through in the chat, and I don't know if you can see it, but it's, how did your background in education help or tie into what you're doing now in the tech sector?
Yeah, so I'd say I never thought my education degree or what I learned there would really actually translate into tech. I never sought out going into tech. Like I said earlier at the start of the show, like I kind of just fell into it. But once I was into it, I realized a lot of the like processes for managing big groups of people, which is what you learn to do in education. You learn how to manage 30 bodies in a room at any given time and make sure that they have what they need to be successful. That is the core of education. How do you make sure your students are successful? So you can take some of those methodologies and translate them into people operations and how you serve your team, because the core element there is, how can I ensure that my team is successful? Your team is, you can call them your students, but that's not really accurate either. You're there to, help them, give them the resources, get them, the education that they want, connect them with mentors, make sure that their managers are giving them good feedback, giving them feedback if they want to grow, helping them guide their career path, which is a lot of what you do with students. And so taking that sort of and just translating it to a step up of like, okay, I'm not doing this with kids, I'm doing it with adults. And I think that helped me a lot, surprisingly, and I didn't think it would.
I'm just kind of picturing you trying really carefully not to compare places that you've worked to like a kindergarten classroom, but well done. I
would never do that.
Never, of course not. I've worked places that I think the kindergarten classes are way better behaved. Awesome. So and then maybe that kind of ties into the next question, which is, that's good. Let's see, what was number 2? Actually, let's go.
Just lost you, Andrew.
Yeah, I'm back. Should be back. Am I back?
You're back. I'm here. Yeah, I can hear you.
Zoom muted me. It was like, you're talking too loud, man. Got to turn down this volume here a little bit. So from that same person, there's another question that came in before. And the question is like, what is, so you are involved as a mentor and you mentor sort of students and young people and all the rest of it. So like, what have you found to be the most rewarding / best thing about being a mentor for young people that are in the tech sector?
Two things. One, I learn a lot too. Like when you're mentoring somebody, it's not a one-way street. It's very two-way because you learn what their expectations are, you learn what they're looking for, you learn new technologies. You learn a lot from mentoring somebody, and you also learn how to give feedback. You learn how to work with different types of people, and you can help translate those learnings over to other members of your team. And so I think mentorship is, if you're a senior in any type of role, whether it's software development, marketing, sales, education, whatever, you should be mentoring people, if not just because it's the right thing to do, and these young people need mentorship because the work world has changed so much since I joined it, and I'm sure you joined it, Andrew, but it not only is it the right thing to do, but you will also get so much in return as a mentor. You will learn what people expect now and what the next generation of employees is looking for and wants. And so that's one of the things that I love about mentorship is that not only do I get to give back, which feels really good, and to see, young people grow their careers and really land amazing jobs and go off to do amazing things. And, I would like to think that I maybe had an effect on them. Maybe I didn't, but, as a mentor, you hope that you help them get there. But the other part is that I get to learn a lot on their journey as well.
Totally. Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, especially on that side of like getting an inner view into kind of up and coming trends that are going there, like related to both that employment world, but just like in general, even with obviously I work directly with students and the tech sector. And so I'm seeing things that I have people now coming to me that are from both the education and the tech side that are saying like, hey, you've got insight into these things. Please tell me about this. And I'm like, the only reason I have insight into this is because I like have folks that I work with as like a mentee, and I have folks that I work with as a mentor that are like giving me this information that I can pass on to you. So I totally feel you about like the two-way street there. That's so true.
Yeah. And it's like not every mentor and mentee are paired well. And so also figuring out if you should be like, as the mentor, it's your job to know if like I can actually mentor this person, and then finding them the right mentor is also then kind of that other piece of the puzzle.
So does that exist though? So for folks that are out there that are watching the stream or that they're catching it on YouTube afterwards, like if you go into a company, one of the things that I find, even so, we just put a job posting out for some high school software development interns. So we're basically hiring high school students to come and be open source software developers, and we're going to pay them for it. Like these jobs don't exist out there really in the real world. And I put it out there, and I've gotten a lot of questions being like, oh, I don't think that I have what it takes to be successful in here. Are there going to be opportunities for me to have mentorship? Like, have you seen in most companies where there's that level of, oh my gosh, I don't think that I can do this, but also companies that are and are not setting up mentorship programs within there? Sorry, that was a really weirdly phrased question. So question number one, yes. That actually ties in better. Do you see that sort of, I don't think that I'm qualified to do this a lot from people when they're coming in? And then on the other side, are there things that you do to set up new employees for success once they get in the door at the companies that relate to mentorship?
Yeah, so definitely, let's go tackle that first question first of like, I don't think I can do this. We see that definitely with junior people, with your sort of non-mainstream employees that you'd normally get in tech. So, minority workers or underrepresented employees, and this is one reason why I'm really passionate about how job posting should actually be crafted. I don't think there should be requirements listed. I don't think there should be things like you must have a university degree, you must have 7 years experience in what so-and-so. I think it should be, this is what the job does. This is what you're going to do in 3 months. This is what you're going to do in 12 months. If you are excited by that, then I want to talk to you. And then making sure that whoever we talk to and hire for that role is successful by, providing mentorship, making sure that there's a senior member in the team who can guide them, give them the feedback that they need. But it's not just about that manager, it's also about their peers and how they work together. And so building out that team and empowering them and teaching them how to give effective peer feedback, teaching them how to take effective peer feedback and effective manager feedback. And then also the other side of things of having that people operations person also connecting with them, in that, the first 3 months of their career at an organization, checking in with them every week or every 2 weeks and just asking them, how are you doing? Are you feeling successful? Do you have the resources that you need? How are your projects coming along? Have you been able to set some goals with your manager? And just like helping them navigate that system, especially for like first time or second time junior employees who are like, I have no idea what I'm getting into, just starting my co-ops, and like really helping them build those muscles. And so when they go into future roles, they can kind of say, no, these are my expectations. I should be setting my goals in the first month. I should have some mentorship. I should be, seeing a progression as I, have my role expand within this organization. I think that's super important, and I think more and more companies are trying to do that, and they're building those processes out and creating better onboarding systems. But and especially now with COVID, with everyone being remote, like it's on everyone's mind and everyone's doing it and everyone's trying to figure it out. Whereas before, you could kind of just like, you're sitting beside people, so you can tap somebody on the shoulder and ask them questions. But now that everyone's remote, it's like, no, you need to like set a really strong onboarding process, or else people are going to fall through the cracks, and they're not going to come back to work for you, and then they're going to tell all their friends that it was a terrible experience, and they shouldn't work for you either.
So is that an issue? Is that an issue that you see? Because you don't necessarily see that as being a thing that exists certainly in like the tech world, that people will tell their colleagues and their friends and their peers, like, this is not a good company to work for. Is that especially true in the tech sector, or do you think it's kind of as common in all the different sectors?
I think it depends on what tech community you're a part of. I think in the smaller tech communities like Victoria, yes, 100%, you can get a brand and a notoriety pretty quickly on how you treat your employees, and people will learn about that pretty quickly. I think in larger tech communities like Toronto and Waterloo and maybe Vancouver, maybe not so much, but people still talk to each other, especially because if you hire a React Native developer, they're going to React Native developer meetups. They're going to talk to those developers, and they're going to be like, oh, you started a new job. It's been a month. How's it been? And if they're like, you know what, it's been terrible. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. No one's setting me up properly. I had to ask for everything, and it's a gong show there. And then people are going to be like, oh, well, I'm not going to apply to that company when next time they have a job opening. Whereas they're like, it's been amazing. The onboarding experience has been like phenomenal. I know exactly what my goals are. I know exactly what's expected of me. I've already had one-on-ones with my manager. We're setting goals next week. Like, those are two very different stories. And if you're saying that to your friends are like, oh, maybe I'm not ready to look now, but when I am ready to look, I'm going to talk to my friend and be like, hey, are you hiring at your company? Like, you had such a good experience there. Can I get a job there too?
Yeah, that's so true. Awesome. Thanks so much. So if you're just tuning into the stream, welcome. You have tuned into an awesome stream on a Thursday evening. You're here at Q&A Corner, presented by HighTechU, based out of the University of Victoria. We're here with Noah Warder, who is the head of people for, it's Guusto, yeah?
Guusto, yeah.
Guusto, I was close, but I didn't get the extra U. Of Guusto, co-founder of Battlesnake, former COO of Battlesnake, and many other really cool tech jobs. We're talking tech and people ops and what it's like to be in the tech sector. And I'm about to go down an interesting road that isn't related to any of the questions, but popped up while kind of you were talking. That said, if anybody has questions that they want to throw in there and you're just coming in, you're like, oh, I don't have any questions to ask, throw it in the stream chat. You can answer it there. And then if you have questions afterwards, if you're catching this live on YouTube, or not live on YouTube, if you're catching this on YouTube, you can still post the questions down there. I'll make sure to get them over to Noah afterwards, and he will be able to answer them maybe in a follow-up. Anyway, so I'm interested in talking diversity in tech. How do you feel? So I'm interested in your experience engaging with those folks that you were talking about. So folks that are coming to tech from a non-traditional background. This will feed into maybe a more lightweight question afterwards, but I think the biggest question is, what have you found to be really successful for engaging those people or showing those people that they do have a place in the tech industry? And is that any different than kind of what you've had to do to support other folks that are coming in?
So, I'm going to preface this with I'm a white male, top of the privileged food chain here. And so I understand that I can never really understand what people go through that aren't in my position. But I think big things that I've tried are making sure using inclusive language within our job postings, trying to remove gendered language from the workplace, making sure that there's systems and policies and procedures in place for that people feel protected and safe to give feedback and to point things out that are not inclusive or run countermand to that diversity and inclusion sort of mission and alignment that I've always tried to bring to the organizations. And I'll be the first one to admit I have made mistakes in the past, and I've learned from those mistakes, and I'm always trying to grow and do better. But I think the biggest things is authenticity and trying to build trust, and having honest conversations with people and owning your shortcomings. I think if when you're interviewing somebody who does come from one of those underrepresented communities and they ask you what your diversity and inclusion program is or why there isn't more diversity in your company, you need to own that answer and be like, look, it's a problem. We know it's a problem. We're trying to fix it. Here are all the ways we are trying to fix it. And we know we need to do more. And we're willing to put the resources and time and effort into doing that. That's really the only way you can do it, is to own the problem and have your founders and your executives also own the problem and be buying into that issue as well, because tech has a huge diversity problem, and anyone who says differently has their head in the sand. And it's not a pipeline issue, and it's not a candidate issue. It's a company issue. It is the company's job, and companies across the tech industry who need to step up and try and help fix this problem and bridge the divide and start paying people what they're worth, start being transparent about their compensation practices, and be transparent about their promotion streams and how that all works, and have very open feedback processes as well. Because if you are open about your compensation practices and you're posting how much a role is going to get paid on your website when you're looking for a candidate, that tells everyone in your organization what you're paying for that role, and they should already know that. That shouldn't be a surprise to them. And everyone in the organization should know what every role pays and what that band is. Maybe not know exactly what somebody's salary is, but know that in a senior software role, they can get paid from $100,000 to $140,000. And at the director of operations role, they get paid $100,000 to $130,000. And so that's the idea, is that everyone has a rough idea where everybody is, and so you can understand and I'm a underrepresented, and coming from an underrepresented demographic in the tech sector. I'm a senior engineer. I can I know what I get paid, and I can assume that the other senior engineer is getting paid a very similar amount of money to me, because we're both in the same band. And being very candid and open about that, I think is a really strong way to do that. Making sure that equitable pay, equal pay, all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Sorry, I threw a tough one at you, but now we'll go for some easier questions.
It's good. It's something that needs to be talked about a lot. And as young people are coming into into the industry, they should be coming in with eyes wide open, because I'd say the tech industry does a really good job of putting glam and bling on companies and being look at our beautiful office spaces and look at all the perks and beer and coffee and snacks and free lunches that you get to have. But that's not a culture. That's not what a company should really be about. It should be, oh no, how do you treat your people? Are you paying fairly? Are you paying equally across all positions? What's your vacation policy like? Do you support parents? What's your, sick leave policy, disability policy? What are all these things that you do to support people I don't care if you have a ping pong table in your lunchroom. That means nothing in the long run. But how are you supporting the people that are working for your organization?
That's awesome. Preach. That was fantastic. And it's funny because I've heard this. There's some really amazing people that are working in HR, in people ops in Victoria, and I've had similar conversations, but never so eloquently put. So kudos, Noah. Okay, so then let's maybe talk money, because that was one of the questions that came through. Is like, how much can somebody make? But I'm also interested in kind of throwing something back to you that you said before. So I know I applied for a tech job. So years ago, like 4 years ago, I was trying to get out of education and I applied for a tech job and they said, how much do you want to get paid? And I was like, I don't know, like, how much do you want to pay me? Like, what's that about? And what are maybe some tips that you have for negotiating a salary earlier on in your career when you're getting into tech?
Yeah. I hate that question. I think it's a terrible question. I don't think companies should ask it because you're really taking any power away from the employee, because you're like, well, what do you want to make? And people often, again, especially from underrepresented groups, often undersell themselves. And you're only promoting and rewarding the people who are the biggest askers. Usually the loudest person in the room who has the most confidence is going to ask for the highest salary, and you're only rewarding those people. You're not rewarding your best employees, you're rewarding your loudest employees. And so I hate that question. I don't think that question should ever be asked in an interview process, and I think it should be done away with across the industry. What I think the process should be is, we pay $100,000 to $140,000 for this position. Is that range okay for you? And if it's like, no, that's lower than I expected, be like, okay, well, let's talk about the whole compensation package. Here's all the other things that we do. Does that, seem appropriate to you? And if the answer is still no, then it's like, great, we haven't really wasted anybody's time. Let's just part ways here. We're not going to have any more interviews because this is what we pay and this is why we pay it. We've done it based on market data and all these other things, and these are all the benefits that we provide. And you expect more, which is fine. You should ask for more if you think you can get it. And so you go look for more, and we're going to continue to pay what we pay. I think that's really important. And the other part of your question of like, how do you negotiate salary? I think the biggest thing is come armed with data. So try and get that salary data. There are free salary surveys out there. I think Randstad does one. Maybe I'll put that in the Twitch chat. I think it's Randstad does one for free. It's pretty good. And there's a couple other ones out there for Canada. You can also go to Glassdoor and look at what salaries for your area or for your companies. You can go to AngelList, sometimes has salaries listed. And then PayScale, you can also go in there and put in your role and how many years of experience you have and what city you're in. And it can usually tell you what the industry standard is, like what's the low point, what's the high point, what's the midpoint for that position. And so depending on how many years of experience you have, you can sort of negotiate based on that. And then you can also like ask about the whole compensation package, because it's not just about salary. Because like you can make a lot more money in San Francisco, but your cost of living is going to be extensively more. Your medical benefits are going to be extensively more. It's just going to cost a lot more to live there. So you also have to keep in mind where you're living, how much vacation you're going to get, what the benefits package is like. And then I'm going to touch on something that equity. So startup equity is worthless. I'm going to throw that out there. It's worthless. It's worth nothing because chances are you won't get anything from it. It's a 1 in a million chance. It is called the tech lottery for a reason. And so if you're offered equity in exchange for salary, you probably shouldn't take that job, because that means that they are not willing to pay you what you're worth. Equity should be a bonus on top of being paid properly. And so if you are young, and I see this all the time with junior developers and other companies of like, they're like, well, I took like a slightly lower salary because they gave me this great equity package. And it's like, no, that's wrong, because as soon as you leave that organization, you only have 90 days to execute on that. And what junior developer has, $30,000 to buy out all their shares that they're then going to have to pay taxes on, that, chances are they'll never actually see anything from. And so again, equity is worthless. Don't take it in exchange for salary. And that's a pretty strong opinion, and I know that is. And I know a lot of founders out there who would disagree with me, but that's my opinion.
Hey, listen, I really didn't know about the whole vestment schedule until I started watching like Silicon Valley, and I watched like the entire series, and then I was like, oh, this seems like a good idea. But then I was reading exactly about that, like vesting schedules and the way that shareholders get paid out before anybody else, and then nobody wins except the shareholders, right?
Yeah, founders and shareholders are usually the ones that make the most, and then it trickles down. And like, I think there's a lot of ways that the industry can do it better, and I think some of those ways are, I think like the typical vesting schedule isn't a major problem of like 1 year cliff with a 4-year vest, and I'll explain that quickly in a minute. But I think it's more about how long you have to execute on your options after you leave an organization, especially for your early employees, because what you're really doing is penalizing them for being an early employee. What you should give your early employees is like, for every year you're with the organization, you get a year that you don't have to execute on your equity. And so if you're with the company for 2 years, if you leave, you've got 2 years where you can, choose to buy your shares or not. And if we sell in that time, then great, you get a little buyout. And if not, then that's fine. But then you're at least giving somebody a little bit more access to the equity instead of 90 days. You've got 3 months to buy that out if you want it. Otherwise, it goes back into the share pool, and the only person who's benefiting from that are the founders.
Yeah, so can you maybe explain kind of how it works? So let's say I'm coming in for a job at Guusto, and you're saying, listen, I'm going to pay you $10,000 a year, but I'll give you $70,000 in stocks. And I say yes. What is that actually like? What? And obviously that's a huge over exaggeration. Maybe.
Yes, very much so.
But like, what does that actually look like for the employee? So if they're offered like $30,000 in shares, or what would that look like in the interview? Would somebody say, here's $30,000 in shares, or the way to be like, you get 2% of the company, or what?
So it depends. Some companies will say, here's the number of shares that you get, and that's how much percentage that equals to. And some companies will be like, you get a percentage. And so there's two different frames of mind there. But again, like what I said, like if they say you're getting $30,000 in shares, that's a bit of a red flag, because those shares are not actually worth $30,000. You can't take them and sell them on the stock market because they're not listed on the stock market. You can't do anything with that. It's just a piece of paper that means nothing unless the company gets sold or they go public. And so I really don't like it when someone says, I'm giving you $30,000 worth of equity, because you're not. You're giving them a percentage of the company. The company is technically worth something, but most of these startups aren't profitable. So who knows if they're actually going to be worth something anytime soon. And then like what a 1 year cliff and a 4-year vest means is that, so if you get hired at a company, you get a salary, they give you some stock options. What that means is that in the first year of your tenure, you are actually, if you leave, you don't get any of your stock options. And this is done to protect the company. You don't want somebody like joining for 3 months and then leaving and taking 4 years worth of stock with them. So in that first year, you have a cliff, and so you're vesting your options for that full year. On your 1 year anniversary, you get 25% of the however many options you say. Let's say you got 100 stock options, and so after your first year, you get 25 stock options. Now you have 25 stock options you can buy if you want, and then every month for the next 3 years, you get an equal percentage of stock options vesting. And then if you leave after 4 years, then you've earned all 100. If you leave after 2 years, you've earned 50. If you leave after 3 years, you've earned 75. And so there's lots of good literature around this, and maybe I'll send you some links, Andrew, and you can attach them to the YouTube post.
Awesome.
But the big thing is like, equity is not worth anything unless your company is public and you can actually trade and sell that equity. And unless you're willing to make a bet on that company. And I actually listened to a really good podcast about this the other day, on Redefining HR. There was a founder saying, like, if you're not willing to invest in the company yourself, then should you take that job? And that's maybe not as appropriate for junior developers and junior people who are just trying to get experience, but for like someone a little bit more senior, like, you're taking a risk working for this company. Are you willing to invest? Would you invest your own money into it? And if not, maybe you should look somewhere else, because you're investing your time into that company. And so that's the other way to look at it. It's like, are you willing to invest your time into the company, because that is what you're doing.
So true. Very cool. Okay, another kind of angle on that. I'm interested in talking job descriptions. So job descriptions are interesting in the tech field. I remember going to a meeting a couple of years ago where somebody was talking about the fact that there are too many or not enough folks to fill positions, and then it was a conversation around like, well, technically there's enough people to fill all the junior positions, but intermediate and senior positions there's not. And then somebody said, what's an intermediate position? And then there were 6 different people being like, oh, this is what intermediate means. Like if somebody sees in a job description and it says like, we're looking for an intermediate developer or a junior developer or whatever, what do those things actually mean in practice for you when you're looking for the job?
So the bad answer here is, but the true answer is, it's dependent on the company. So every company has a different definition of what a junior, intermediate, or senior developer is. And unless you're like Amazon or GitHub or one of the larger organizations, which has it like, it's very like structured, like you are a developer level 1, 2, 3, 4, like all the way up to level 10, and it's very defined what that is. It can mean wildly different things across different organizations. And so I'd say typically, loose framework, junior is like 0 to 2 years of experience. Co-ops work in there too. You're just starting out in your career. That's a junior developer. 2 to 4, 5 is intermediate, and beyond that is senior. But that also doesn't take into account what you're working on. So if you're a developer who's pretty brand new, but you work on like a really complex, hairy tech stack that requires a lot of innovation, a lot of knowledge, you can sort of speed past those levels and become a senior developer after 4 years, because you have worked on some really crazy infrastructure and you've done some really amazing things tech-wise. And so there's and then on the other hand, you could be a developer who's worked on a very simple project for 5 years. So people would still consider you intermediate, because you have like if you're going and trying to apply for an intermediate role at a pretty complex company that does some really interesting things with data and like has crazy pipelines and handles a lot of like customer data, they're going to be like, well, no, you haven't handled anything complex. I would hire you maybe as a junior, but not as an intermediate, because you've never done anything like this before. So again, bad answer is that it's dependent on the company, but there's some loose frameworks to kind of go in there. I'd say the best thing is like try and work on really interesting, crazy problems, and you can kind of fast track those job titles a bit.
Very cool. And then I guess kind of on that same line, so you're a non-tech person working in tech.
Yes.
So I know a lot of people sort of think tech sector and they're like, oh, the only people that work in tech sector are programmers. Like, what other kinds of roles exist in like these software companies that somebody who's maybe on the stream or is checking out the video and they're like, I'm not a tech person, that they're actually going to want to go in to do?
Yeah, I mean, tech isn't just software, right? That's the part that powers the software, but you got to have people to sell it. You got to be able to market it. You got to get people to manage the teams. You got to get people to manage the managers who manage the teams. And so, like you said, like I have an education degree, and I, help companies run at their best, and I ensure that their people are taken care of. And like, I am the most non-technical person you can imagine. I can talk tech to developers because I had to learn how to do that to hire them, but if you ask me to program something, I'll look at you like you're nuts. I can do some markdown in like on GitHub, or I can maybe do a bit of HTML while I'm looking at the guide beside me. But if they're like, write some Python, I'm going to look at you like you're crazy. And I would like to learn that, but there's other things that are more appropriate for my role that I'm trying to learn instead. But I'd say like, if you want to work in tech, find a way to work in tech that works for you. You could be a product manager. You could be a marketer. You could be, a designer. You could be an artist. You could be a manager. You could be on sales. Like, there's so many ways to work in tech that are non-technical. I'd actually say there's more ways to work in tech than they are technical. the reason you hear about all the technical jobs is because those are the hardest ones to fill, because there's such a demand for developers.
Totally. So we're getting right down to the end, but I asked the same thing on every single stream, every single Q&A corner. If there was like a 5-second final tidbit that if somebody's going to take away that last thing that Noah says and it's like gold, what's the like final thought that you want to leave anybody that's catching the stream with?
Oh, no pressure. I would say like the biggest thing that like, I'd say if you want to work in tech, figure out a way that you can do that works for you. Don't try and force the issue. If you want to, if you think working in tech is the right role for you or the right path for you, find a way to do that, because there's lots of ways to do that. I'm a perfect example of that. I have an education background. I used to manage restaurants. I started a donut business. Like, my background, it could not be more non-traditional tech, but here I am helping organizations, grow and succeed and, have great employee experiences. And so if you want to do it, you can do it. You just have to find the right path to do it. And you're going to have to grind a little bit. That's the other part, is like, it's not going to be easy. But if you want to do it, you can do it, and do co-ops in tech. That's the other big thing. If you're a student, try and get a co-op job at a tech company. That's the biggest thing you can do, because if you've worked for one tech company, other tech companies will take you more seriously. And also check out Venture for Canada if you're a university student. That's another good one.
Awesome. Well, Noah, thank you so much. I know you just started a brand new gig with Guusto. I know you've been working all day, 2 kids, like crazy life. So I really, really appreciate you making this work later in the evening. This was such an awesome, there's so many tidbits here, and I actually am going to go through the video, and when people watch on YouTube, they can just jump right to the questions that are interesting to them, which is kind of nice as well. So thanks so much. I really appreciate you being on the stream. And if you're in the stream and you're just catching this, you missed an awesome Q&A corner with Noah Warder, who's the head of people for Guusto, based out of Vancouver, co-founder of Battlesnake. Thank you so much, Noah. Have a great night. And to everybody on the stream, thanks so much for tuning in. Check us out again next month, same bat time, same bat channel, for our next Q&A corner. It's going to be awesome. Thanks so much, Noah. Thanks so much, everybody. And be kind, be safe, be healthy, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Andrew.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.